All right, so this is part 3. This is actually our masterclass number 5. And we've been doing it for 5 weeks in a row. And what I'm going to be doing is taking next week off, and then we'll start to go every other week. And I'll announce our new topic at the end of this presentation. But I want to be grateful for people that are watching this today. I know how important your time is, and I know you want to get a lot of value, pardon me, with every second that you have. You don't have a lot of disposable energy to waste, so it has to be worthwhile for your time. So I hope that this presentation delivers for you. And we're talking about, in this third part, adrenal fatigue and sleep. So let's go further in that. And so I've used this slide the whole way through, and it hasn't changed who this is for. This is for men and women that are stuck in overwhelm and burnout. They are still looking for answers because they're going to a lot of different places, whether it's the internet, it's podcasts, it's researching on their own, going from doctor to doctor, and they're just not getting answers. And they know that there's missing puzzle pieces, that they're not crazy, that the answer is out there. And it's a matter of, once you put all the puzzle pieces together, you can tap into that hidden energy reserve. And if you've been struggling for a long time, or you're just feeling stuck, this is for you. These whole master classes are for you. And it's interesting because I look at it as, you don't have enough energy to get through the day. You don't have enough energy to be able to sleep. So it's almost opposite to what you would think. You would think, well, if I had more energy, I wouldn't be able to sleep. It's not that at all. It's that when I say you need more biological cellular energy, you need cellular energy to clear out your excitatory neurotransmitters, or you need cellular energy to reduce inflammation, or you need cellular energy to make inhibitory neurotransmitters, or to get out of fight or flight. So it's not so much you need energy so that you have more energy that you can't sleep. You need fundamentally cellular energy so that you can have your cells, tissues, organs, and systems of the body be able to handle stressors, so that you bounce back quickly and you wake up feeling recharged and regenerated, and you have a surplus of metabolic reserves, and then you have energy throughout the day. And then when you hit the pillow, you fall asleep like a baby, and you should be doing that day in, day out. And when was the last time that really happened? And when you go to your doctor and they tell you that nothing's wrong, you know something's wrong, something's missing. So this is for you. So in the next 45 minutes, I'm going to teach you how I really feel that our current healthcare model should be called sick care model, and how it's set up to keep you sick by treating the symptoms. And this part of the presentation always gets a bit controversial, but it's just telling the truth. And the truth is that medications don't ever treat the cause of the problem. They treat the symptom of the problem. Unfortunately, whether it's even alternative schools or the traditional medical schools, they don't teach cellular energy 101. They teach you how to manage a diagnosis based on symptoms and how to treat that symptom. And it's pharmaceutically driven, and it's a shame. So anyways, it is set up to keep you sick. As far as, I want to teach you why you're not able to sleep, and how does that have to do with your adrenals and the relationship between stress and insomnia. And then lastly, in today's presentation, what roles do your genes and genetic susceptibilities play in your insomnia? So our genetics, is insomnia genetic? And as I go through this presentation, I never think anything is purely genetic. Genetic is the loaded gun, and epigenetics are the triggers. And depending on where your loaded guns are loaded, and how many epigenetic triggers cause the gun to go off, sorry for the violent analogy, will result in a lot of symptoms, of which in this presentation masterclass series, it's insomnia, not being able to fall asleep, not being able to turn your mind off, too much ruminations, you're in overwhelm, you're in sympathetic survival mode, or you're waking up throughout the evening because you just can't stay asleep the entire time, or you're waking up with no energy whatsoever, or all three, or a combination thereof. So we're going to be explaining that today to you. So I'm excited to do that. In the first presentation, we talked about circadian rhythm entrainment. That's a really big one for sure. I have the presentation on YouTube. If you want the recording of it, just let us know and we'll send you it. It's unlisted on YouTube. We also talked about the role of blood sugar. In our next masterclass series, we'll be going over blood sugar and adrenals and the proper way of eating. We'll be talking about metabolic flexibility. What is time-restricted eating windows? Should I be doing keto? Should I not be doing keto? We'll be talking all about that in our next presentation series. What and why your excitatory neurotransmitter balance is essential for quality sleep. We started to talk about glutamate in part 1, which is ultimately artificial natural, which aren't natural foods that raise your glutamate levels way too high, combined with glyphosates in our soils or in our plants and our pesticides, in our sprays, along with the inability to reduce the glutamate with our bacteria in our microbiome, causing your glutamate levels to surge. And when your glutamate levels are surging, you're not sleeping. Then in part 2, we talked about the excitatory neurotransmitters, histamine, dopamine, and adrenaline. And in today's part, we're going to be talking about genes and genetic susceptibilities and the role they play in insomnia. And I always have this, my promise to you is by the end of the presentation, I want you to have a new aha, one aha is my goal, but I want you to think about your health and your stress and your overwhelm or all the things that you have to do on a daily basis in a different way so that you can literally create energy on demand. So think of it as you are a running balance sheet, a running ledger, if you will, and your expenses on a day-to-day basis can't exceed your income on a day-to-day basis. And I mean that at the 30,000 view foot level, that's going to be a hard way to live. You'll be homeless. Or on the cellular level, and your body will pick and choose the most important prioritized organ system to invest your income on, so that you are not going to do reproduction and you're not going to be sexually motivated or even have the capacity to do it when you have very little income in the body. And ultimately, you're only going to be able to keep the lights on in your home if you didn't have a lot of income coming in. Maybe you're putting food on the table, but you're not going for trips. Same thing with your body. You might be able to regulate your temperature, or maybe you don't. Maybe it's hot outside, you can't cool down, or maybe it's cold outside, you can't heat up. Maybe you can't regulate the increase in blood pressure when you stand up and you need that heart to pump harder and stronger and you feel faintish and lightheaded. Or maybe you have a stressor and you have an inappropriate response to that stress because your body doesn't have the ability to calm and cool and get out of overwhelm. So think of it like that. That's the paradigm shift I like you to have. So this happened last time. I don't know why this is happening, but sorry, it's in my slide presentation. So I'm going to exit out of this and I apologize for that. So I'm going to show you the slides this way. For some reason, when I load it, I can have someone teach me how to do this, but it's set up to do a animation and the animation makes it go away. So we're first going to be talking about why genetics and the difference between genetics and epigenetics. We'll be talking about the analogy of highways and traffic and understanding just what are these epigenetic factors, and then how do these epigenetic factors create the traffic on the highway. And I got to give recognition where recognition is due. A lot of this that I worked on was with a friend and old business partner, Dr. John Thomas, who he and I had created the Your Genetic Type course. And a lot of the work that I'm talking about today was contributed to and created by Dr. John Thomas as well. So I hope you're doing well, John. I haven't talked to John in a long time, so I hope he's doing well. Also, Dr. Bob Miller, who I do the genetic interpretation site for Learn From. He's got great classes if you're interested in that. a lot of the information we're talking about today has to do with the stuff I learned from him. I think it's really important to acknowledge where you get your information from, and always standing on the shoulders of giants is really important. So as far as genetics and epigenetics, like I said, the genetics is the loaded gun and epigenetics is the trigger. Or another way of saying it is genetics is the lanes of highway, epigenetics is the traffic. And you could have very low or very restricted lanes of highway, but you can flow traffic very well because it's efficient. It's at 1 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of cars on the road, and there's not a lot of car accidents because the roads are taken care of. Epigenetics would be things like the Super Bowl being let out, and that's all the cars on the highway. Tractor trailer is spilt in the middle of the road. You need a toll to get on the road. There's potholes in the road. Those are epigenetics. So it wouldn't matter if you had 8 lanes of highway and the Super Bowl was let out, or you didn't have the toll to get on the highway, or there was a tractor trailer in the road. That would be, there wasn't very many loaded guns, but there was a lot of triggers. Or there wasn't any closures in the lane, but there was a lot of traffic. Where I see the worst problems is there's a lot of loaded guns and there's a lot of triggers, or there's very limited lanes and there's a lot of lane closures. And that's where you start to see multiple chronic problems with fatigue and burnout and brain fog and motivation and blood sugar balance and weight gain or weight loss or miscarriages, anxiety, depression, bipolar, all of the above, because it's that perfect storm of these genetics and epigenetics. Mindset's really important, and small habits are really important because our body doesn't know the difference between perception and reality. And if you are burning up a lot of oxygen because you're in fight or flight, even though it might be a perception of a stress, that's like having a lot of cars on the highway. And if your highways are narrowed, then that's going to make that highway that much more susceptible for not clearing traffic. That's why genetics are so important, because so many people get it wrong. Oh, I actually listened to the book Metabolical. I'm listening to it for the 3rd time by Robert Lustig. I suggest you read it, but I'm going to be going to a seminar in a week, and he's going to be speaking. And one of the things that he said is that genetics are useless when it comes time to chronic health conditions. And I couldn't disagree more, because the genetics are not looked at as functional genetics. The way it's being taught by traditional approaches are not the functional approach to genetics. The cars and the lanes of traffic and the highway and the tolls and how much traffic is on there and how many tractor trailers are spilt out in the middle of the road. Let me ask you this, Dr. Lustig. Would you think that a highway would have less clearance if there was a lot of traffic, but there was very little lanes? Or would there be any difference between a highway that had a lot of lanes that didn't have any problems? Yes, there would be a difference. The answer is so. The point that I'm telling you this is, don't think about genetics as, oh, I heard that the BRCA gene could cause breast cancer, so I'm going to have a mastectomy, or that I have APO enzymes, APO4, and I'm going to have a problem with Alzheimer's when I get older. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. When you have a million plus women that don't have breast cancer that have the BRCA gene, or a million plus women that do have breast cancer that don't have the BRCA gene, why? Well, if the genetics are so, a lot of doctors that aren't in the know when it comes to nutrigenomics, functional genetics, interpretations, combining the two, they'll say that looking at your genetics for chronic illness is useless, which is completely wrong. Because when you can understand where the susceptibilities lay, for example, if you don't clear hydrogen peroxide effectively and your body's producing a lot of hydrogen peroxide, then knowing that will help you pinpoint and customize and localize and strategically implement strategies that will help with that information. So it's not like you're just treating the gene per se. You're understanding where the roadblocks on the compass or the map lay, and you're making detours around that. Or when you do come to that roadblock, you're doing the proper techniques, whether they're lifestyle, nutrition, supplemental, or pharmaceutical. You're doing the proper techniques to address that perfect storm of the environment and the genetics that created the problem in the first place. I hope that makes sense. Let me know in the comments if that makes sense to you. But ultimately, susceptibilities, whenever I do a genetic test interpretation, it's a susceptibility, it's a potential. It's never a full-blown, you have this or you have that. It's you have a greater likelihood if the oxygen consumption rate is very high, nutritional status is low, you have viruses, heavy metals, molds, mycotoxins, EMFs, epigenetic things that make that genetic susceptibility much more detrimental or susceptible. So if you have one lane of traffic when you should have 4 lanes, then there's more susceptibility that that traffic is going to back up. It's going to be even worse when there's rush hour. It's going to be even worse when you have a car accident or the roads are bumpy or there's not good lighting, whatever it is. The epigenetics are those factors. So hopefully that made sense. As far as the, so we talked about that. Understanding epigenetic factors. Epigenetic factors are perception. Those are epigenetic factors. But the ones we tend to think of are heavy metals like aluminum, cadmium, arsenic, mercury. Those are major inhibitors of enzymes. And if your enzymes that are coded by your DNA are already slow to begin with, or not working at full capacity to begin with, I use the analogy of a credit card processor. A lot of younger people don't get it. This is where I really feel old, but a lot of younger people don't understand those old credit card processing machines where you would put the card in the machine and you would swipe over it and you would have a transparency. If you inherit an altered gene base pair from your mom or your dad, one or the other, it is considered heterozygous, one polymorphism. I hate the word mutation. Single nucleotide polymorphism is the word. And it's like the credit card goes in the machine sideways. And so you can't get a good transparency. This is my analogy. And then for every 10 swipes, you might only get 7 swipes that are good copies. And then if you have both parents, it's considered homozygous. That's when the card goes in the credit card machine sideways. And now for every 10 swipes, mainly you're getting 3 good swipes. And whatever that credit card is being copied for in your body, it's a gene, and that gene makes an enzyme, and that enzyme helps a physiological function in your body to work, like move iron, clear out chemicals, reduce inflammation and free radicals, convert B vitamins into end products for clearing out excitatory neurotransmitters, being able to use healthy fats for energy production. There's so many things that it does. And ultimately, that's how I would explain it. Now, here's where it gets really difficult, because some genes can be actually upregulated. So what does that mean? It means you put the credit card in the credit card machine normally, and when you make a transparency, you get 3 copies instead of 1. That makes it even more difficult to understand, well, okay, if it's upregulated, is that creating more problems or less problems? So we're still understanding this. And those are the analogies I would use for that. And then how epigenetic create traffic on the highway. I think we just explained that. So I'll go back and look at the questions as when I finish up, so I can answer them there then. And if you have any questions and you don't remember them to the end, just post them in the chat box. Especially if you're watching this from Zoom, this is where we will answer your questions. So who am I? Maybe you don't know me by now, or hopefully you do. My name is Dr. Joel Rosen. And when I say international health coach, it's a privilege, because this morning I had a client in the UK, and then after I had a client in the Czech Republic. And then I had another client in local Florida, and then where I live. And then I had someone else in I believe it was California. So we teach clients all over the world. And I think what the good thing about COVID was, if there's a lot of good things about it, is that it made the world smaller, and it made people realize that you don't need to have the doctor in your local town, that you could see someone online and they could help you all the same, if not more. So we teach the exact same things that we're teaching you in these presentations. And I've worked with over 300 men and women personally and teaching them the strategies you're learning. We also have a high-ranking podcast and continue to speak at conferences. And that's one of my goals, is to start speaking at major conferences to help educate doctors on putting together all of the integrated things that you need to understand about genetics and epigenetics. And today we're talking about as it relates to not sleeping. As far as, make sure you go to, let's see if I could probably play this now that I'm past the parts where it's not working effectively. What I'd like you to do is go to The Truth About Adrenal Fatigue and get the roadmap that I created. I'm really proud of it. It took me a while to create it, but it explains why adrenal fatigue is not accepted in the medical curriculum. It also gets to what is the number one stressor in the body, and ultimately what are the major landmines to avoid. So that's a free report that you can get. And then as far as iron, okay, I'm actually going to go with the presentation because I didn't set up my animations very well. So today what I wanted to do is, there's a lot of different genes that we could be looking at that would be responsible, or more likely higher potential, to create the epigenetic perfect storm of causing the loaded gun to go off, or causing the lanes of highway to have backups and no clearance, that results in not falling asleep, not staying asleep, not waking up feeling recharged. And I could have put 5 deal breakers, 10 deal breakers, but the first deal breaker is iron metabolism. If you're not transporting your iron out of tissues, and you're not combining it with oxygen and copper and vitamin A to be able to get it to delivered to make ATP and water, you're creating oxidative stress. If you're creating oxidative stress, you're depleting your resources, your demand and supply is not in equilibrium. And as a result, you're going to be not able to sleep. Histamine and histamine production and clearance, we talked about that the other day in terms of the things that stimulate histamine and how we clear it. I'll go over the genomics for that today. Antioxidant status is super important. So how well do we signal? How well do we recycle? How well do we synthesize and utilize our antioxidant response elements? How good is our fire department? And of course, neurotransmitter balance and genetic polymorphisms in those areas. We need to talk about all of those. So as far as the iron metabolism, there's something called Fenton reactions, which you might not have heard of, where when you have hydrogen and oxygen combining together, it can create hydroxyl radicals. And then those hydroxyl radicals, when they combine with iron, make Fenton reactions. When hydrogen peroxide combines with iron, it makes hydroxyl radicals. And that's called a Fenton reaction when it's combining with iron. And that is like rusting on the inside. And that's going to cause brain fog, metabolic issues, cardiovascular issues, neurological issues, and sleep is probably your least concern. Although it's really important, you got a burning building in your body or an oxidizing metal in your body that's rusting, and it's busting up cell membranes. And if you don't have good antioxidants, you're going to have major problems. So clearing iron is important mineral that's needed for many functions. If it's in excess and it's not chaperoned through the body, it becomes a dangerous free radical. And because iron has limited capacity to be excreted in the body, it can build up in your organs, your liver, your heart, your pancreas. And this is a problematic, obviously a major problem, which we're talking about insomnia as the problem, but it's much more than insomnia. And as far as the gene SNPs that we look at copper transportation gene SNPs, SLC31A1 or SLC31A2. And this is all done through the genomics that we look at. Copper utilization, I didn't realize that I had major challenges in this one, but this helps copper to get into the mitochondria to be able to clear the exhaust and create a very clean transmission. If those genes are polymorphic and you have a lot of demand and supply issues, meaning your oxygen consumption, your perception of stress, your daily demands, your nutrition, your physical wear and tear on your body, your emotional states, your family support system, your community support system, all of that are epigenetic factors that are going to cause my genetic susceptibility of not delivering copper and oxygen into the mitochondria for me to not make ATP and for me to create excitatory overstimulation, sympathetic windup, and I'm not sleeping. Does that make sense? Ceruloplasm, genetic polymorphisms, beta carotene, BCMO, ferropotin are some of my most challenged clients. When you have the SLC40A1, it's the only iron exporter in the body. So it really helps to move iron out of all of your tissues. And that can be really problematic. I would really, really urge you, if you have a sleeping issue, to look at that gene SNP or talk to someone that can help you with that. Iron transportation gene SNPs, iron absorption gene SNPs. Unfortunately, doctors only know about one RSID number, which means there's many different locations of this gene in your along your chromosomes, and doctors only know about this HFE gene that has a specific number to it. And you could have another number, or you could have other polymorphisms in the absorption issue and have tertiary type 3 hereditary hemochromatosis. And because your ferritin levels aren't high, and because the wide range for ferritin is 30 to 400 and you might be at 250, you're not exceeding 400 and you don't have the HFE gene that doctors know about. So you're flushed down the toilet with the bathtub saying, nope, you don't have an iron issue. You do have an iron issue. It's just they didn't learn that, and you're being told that there's nothing wrong. Iron recycling issues is a major issue. If 95 to 99% of your iron stores in your body is recycled, and if you don't have the full capacity ability to recycle and repackage heme, which is going to be NADPH dependent. I don't want to get too scientific on that, but I see a lot of people that have a lot of these polymorphisms, and they're more susceptible to the perfect storm of epigenetic overlapping triggers that cause the loaded gun to go off and result in sleep issues and any hydrogen peroxide clearance issues. Because if you're not clearing hydrogen peroxide, you're going to create that hydroxyl radical, and that hydroxyl radical is going to combine with iron to create Fenton reactions. So it's a bit more scientific than I wanted to get with you, but those are the main iron polymorphism genes that I see. The next one are the histamine genes. And we talked about histamine. Histamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter that is coordinating your immune system whenever there's been an allergen or a toxin. It's when the mast cells degranulate, and typically that's going to happen with stress, alcohol, fermented foods, immune system challenges, and even what we just finished talking about, iron oxidation. Anything that stimulates your mast cell is going to produce histamine. And these genes here are the celiac-like potentials, HLA and KIAA1109. These enzymes, once they're polymorphic, which we test on a genetic test, you're more likely to have celiac disease. You're more likely to have histamine. That histamine is more likely to not get cleared out, create a massive amount of overwhelm, overstimulation, classical itchy, redness, rashes, runny nose, watery eyes, allergies to many things, but also non-classical symptoms like insomnia or GI issues, or just not sleeping or being overstimulated, as far as that goes. And then, oh, I'm sorry, okay, I'm sorry. I thought maybe you weren't able to see my screen, but you are. The ABP1 is what helps to make DAO enzyme in your GI tract. Many people have this issue, and taking the DAO product can be very, very helpful for that. I tend to poo-poo keeping your meals with low histamine if you don't have this gene SNP, because you're already so limited with the foods that you could be eating that you are now making even less availability of foods. If you're saying, well, I can't eat avocados because it has too much histamine, or almonds have too much histamine, you have to get nutrients, you have to get sustenance, and you got to figure out the tug of war. What's more important, calories and nutrients, or maybe kicking up the ocean floor a little bit with histamine foods? But if you don't have the ABP1, DAO, AOC1 enzyme issue, then I would say that you're tripping over dollars to save pennies, and you shouldn't be minimizing your histamine intake unless you have major challenges in that regards. HNMT is an MTHFR gene SNP. Oh, what I wanted to say is, you'll notice with my top 3, and it's actually my top 4 gene SNPs, is I don't have MTHFR listed in any one of those. And I was one of the first MTHFR followers of Dr. Ben Lynch, who should have acknowledged at the beginning as well, for planting the seed and making that first step of 1,000 miles journey for myself. But I don't mention MTHFR because all of these things are energy expenders, meaning they're overhead, and MTHFR is an income. And if you don't have proper MTHFR function, it's going to mess up this enzyme, or it's going to mess up any enzyme that has an MT in it. So I don't mean to get too complicated on you, but I don't even really look at MTHFR as a major challenge. And if you have a question with that, I'd love to hear your answer or your question. MAO, we call that the warrior genes. Not only does it clear histamine, it clears dopamine and adrenaline. And if you have polymorphisms on that, it would seem very reasonable that you're not a good sleeper. Just as an aside, riboflavin can be a really good nutrient to try out if that's a thing for you. UGT, major problem for me. And then your histamine receptor genes. This is a really interesting gene. I would, if you thought about having adrenal fatigue problem, and I'm a spokesperson for having that and helping people with that. When I did my genomics, I had no idea I had this gene SNP, but basically what it does is it converts progesterone into cortisol. So if your cortisol is low, or your demand to make cortisol is high, or both, and you have a weakened highway that doesn't allow traffic to get through to the other side, where progesterone is your starting point and cortisol is your destination, and you can't get through, but you have lots of stress, that can be majorly problematic, and you could have issues with sleep. Now, for me, it didn't result in sleep issues. It resulted in anxiety more than anything else. And then IL-13, that's a major gene that we see polymorphisms that can create major insomnia and sleep issue concerns. Then we have our next antioxidants. So NRF2 and KEEP1. I know a lot of people have tried the NRF2 product, and I think it can be a good product, but it's not a magic wand. You have to put all these puzzle pieces together. I'll be doing some more presentations in the future about NAD and NAD production, NAD utilization, and NADPH production. But if you have any of these gene polymorphisms, KY, NU, IDO1, IDO2, PARP, PARP2, QPRT, G6PD, all of these things are essential for stabilizing your mast cells, for clearing out histamines, excitatory neurotransmitters, recycling antioxidants, taking pressure off your HPA axis. These are major gene SNPs that we see major problems. And of course, glutathione. And a lot of people know glutathione gene SNPs as GST or GPX or GSR, but NRF2 controls glutathione. And what I find is a lot of people will take NAC and they feel worse with it. And I would be suggesting NAC if you had a CTH or CBS gene SNP. But if you had a GSR gene SNP also, and you didn't have these gene SNPs and you're taking NAC and you feel worse, the reason is because you're not recycling your glutathione once you're telling your body to make it. A little more complicated than I wanted to get, but I've found anecdotally with my clientele, worse and worse outcomes by taking glutathione alone. And that's because we're so depleted in NADPH. And NADPH is what helps to recycle glutathione. So if you're taking so many nutrients to make glutathione, but you're depleted in your NADPH, your problem is not a glutathione production problem. It's a glutathione recycling problem. And you've probably heard this before, where when you take an antioxidant, itself becomes a free radical. That's what's happening, is your glutathione as an antioxidant or a detoxification nutrient isn't getting recycled. And when it's not getting recycled, it creates a more dangerous peroxynitrite radical that's going to cause major problems. And sometimes you'll see cold hands, cold extremities, lack of libido, lack of ability to perform, brain fog, because your nitric oxide is being uncoupled and you're producing superoxide and free radicals. A little more technical than I wanted to get, but I guess the deal breaker take home conclusion is you shouldn't be just taking glutathione and thinking that that's going to solve the problem. Is I guess that's the take home on that. Then the other gene SNPs on the catecholamines or the neurotransmitters, this is really part 4. Dopamine clearance, even adrenaline clearance is COMT, MAO. Oxytocin receptor, really, really interesting gene. I'd just tell you to look at this gene SNP alone. The oxytocin receptor, when you have polymorphisms, it makes you more of an empathic person. So I tell people it's like your antenna is very high and it brings in all these frequencies. And especially with what's going on in the world, it overstimulates you. And it's like you're a lightning rod for stress, or a lightning rod for pain and suffering in the world. And you'll see a lot of people have one copy. I have one copy. A lot of people have 2 copies, both parents. And you tend to be in the health field, the social work field, the community service field, the fundraising field. And ultimately, you have to be very aware of this. And it's a blessing. But if you're not saying no, or you're not keeping your boundaries, or you're not keeping to a schedule, or you're not balancing your glucose, or you're not putting yourself first, you could be doing all these amazing other things, but you're not going to be sleeping because you're just antennas taking in too much frequency and it's driving your sympathetic system. It's really amazing information, that one. DBH, dopamine beta hydrogenase, that converts dopamine into into adrenaline. And if you can't do that, then you could have paradoxal panic and overwhelm. It's like what I call it is it's like you're not able to change your gear from second to third, and that's going to cause a bumpy ride, even though when you smooth it out, you're going to be working harder, if that makes sense. And then these ones help to recycle your neurotransmitters. So if you have any polymorphisms in those, then it's not a foregone conclusion that your two-lane highway is going to be congested, but it's certainly going to be congested when there's lots of cars, or there's a car accident, or there's epigenetic factors, right? Does that make sense? So that's why I want to tell Dr. Robert Lustig, it makes a difference what gene SNPs you have for chronic health conditions. And I'd love, if any of you know him, tell him that I want to speak to him and interview him, because I love his book. When I heard that in his book, I was like, no, that's not true. And there's some other things that he said in the thing that in his book that's not true, but he wrote a book that's amazing. So what can be done about this? Well, the first thing is I could just put this slide here and say, oxygen consumption rate. Be aware of your oxygen consumption rate. Like, what's your demand and supply? Are you getting good nutrients? Are you perceiving the stressors in your life as just overwhelming to your body? Are you breathing slowly? Are you meditating? Are you getting out with nature? Are you keeping to your schedule or letting all the frequency come into you? That's the most important thing for improving your sleep. But ultimately, all of that stimulates your mast cells, which stimulate histamine production. The mast cells stimulate HPA axis in your catecholamines. And then that impacts your adrenal glands. And if you have polymorphisms that don't clear out histamine or don't clear out your excitatory neurotransmitters, then you're going to have more problems than the person that doesn't have the genetic polymorphisms. So hopefully that made sense. And then, so what I have is on my website, I do have a place on my website where you can purchase the DNA test, and then you get 2 1-hour appointments. And I call it my secret weapon. I would never want to work with someone without doing a genetic test, not because I want to find out what gene is broken and just give you a supplement to fix it, but to understand what the perfect storm is and hear your history and know what your day-to-day activity looks like and how is it expressing. Because your gene SNPs will only give me the potentials, but until I actually ask you questions and hear your history and validate it or substantiate it with blood work or objective markers to say, yep, this is what's happening, then I know which genes are relevant or not. Does that make sense? Hopefully that made sense. So that's what we do. It looks like this on our website. I don't have a special right now because it just spends too much time. So we spend 2 1-hour, we record the call, we look at all of your past blood work, we put them on functional scales, and then we give you recommendations based on your diet, your nutrition, your supplements, the testing that you've done, the testing that you need, the interpretations of the genetic results, the interpretation of any tests that you've done in the past. And believe you me, I always thought that was a great saying, believe you me. Believe you me, when you've been suffering for a long time, you send me a boatload of blood tests. And that takes me anywhere between 60 minutes to 2 hours to review that. And then we have on top of that, the 2 1-hour appointments. And then on top of that, we include the genetic test. And we do that for $997. That's a standalone appointment. That means that after the 2 1 hours or 4 half hours and the review of all the stuff that I do to prepare for it, then there's no obligation to do any additional work. I am somewhat hesitant, to be quite honest, to do this appointment with you if that's all you're doing, because I use the analogy, it's like learning how to fly a plane. And now I say, okay, go fly the plane. You need flight lessons now. That's where you actually need to zen in the art of putting together your genomic and perfect storm epigenetic, traveling on the highways and knowing where the roadblocks are and the potholes and the overturned tractor trailers and the tolls and what lanes are restricted, so that you actually know how to get to your destination. And a big aha secret to that is punching your GPS coordinates first. So that's another free bit of advice that's probably more important than anything else. So what does that have to do with anything? Know what it is that you want when you have your health. And not just, well, I don't want this, I don't want that. Specifically, I want to be doing this with my body. I want to be doing this with my social network. I want to be doing this with my community. And I want to be doing this with my purpose. You need to know those things so that you can calibrate and punch in. You would never put a destination you would never put in your GPS settings, no destination. Otherwise, it wouldn't tell you where to go. And so many people don't do that. I'm amazed that they don't. When I ask them, what would you be doing differently? Oh, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be doing that. But yes, what would you be doing? You have to be specific. And the problem is that you've been stressed for so long. A, you haven't given yourself permission to do that. But B, your frontal lobe that does the planning, the sequential, the step, the all of that type of reasoning and spanning out doesn't work very well. And I'm like the spokesperson for my frontal lobe not working well in that capacity. And it takes effort and practice to plan and to reverse engineer what you want. And there's a lot that goes into that: perception, belief, certainty, confidence, knowing that you deserve that. A lot of the reasons people don't get better is they don't believe they are allowed to, or they should, or it's possible, or they deserve it. That's BS, if you ask me. It's your God-given right, or whatever you believe in, to have health. And that's a big aha lesson. So I'll get off my soapbox on that. As far as other things, I've created a new line of supplements. The Re Hist, I'm super proud of. It's lots of, it's not for vegans, got kidney powder in it. but it also has apple polyphenols that are really good for clearing out histamine. That will help with your overcoming overwhelm or being able to turn off your brain. If you don't have the DAO enzyme mutation, it's still helpful. If you do have it, it's especially helpful. Then the cell recalm AM, magnolia bark, L-threonate, danshin, and lemon balm, very calming and sedating to clear out your glutamate and restore your GABA levels. And then the cell recalm PM has more magnolia bark and a couple more calming nutrients for you to be able to sleep. And we did do a special where we'll keep that going, where you get a 15% off if you use the webinar code 15. And on top of that, if you do auto ship, you get an additional 15% off. And I think you'll find with the cell Re Hist, because DAO products typically are $60, $70, this is $40. So with 15% off, that's another $6, and then another $6 for having that off. Pretty good price. So anyways, my next class is going to be on adrenal fatigue and blood sugar stability. I would put / metabolic flexibility / keto diets and or low carb diet and or intermittent fasting or all of the above. But we'll be doing that in 2 weeks. So hopefully you guys found that helpful. I'll open it up for questions now. I'm sorry I didn't get to save my PowerPoint. Kristen, you'll have to help me on making so that I don't have those slides do that next time. But I'll go to the questions here for Leah. So I'd like to talk about organizing a larger format meeting for CM Hines to attend. I don't understand the question. So you want me to okay. Anyways, circadian rhythm. I don't know if that's a question or not. And then as far as it doesn't look, could we please get a link to the circadian rhythm entrainment video? Yep, we'll do that. So if you guys have any questions, let me know. I'd love to answer them. We can talk about MTHFR and is it important? I do feel it's important. It's definitely important to make methylfolate, and methylfolate is very important to make methionine and very important to or help make SAMe if you're not eating methionine. And it's also very important to help recycle your neurotransmitters. And it's also important to help clear out your neurotransmitters. But it's like, I use the analogy, it's like working part-time at McDonald's and trying to pay off your mortgage. It's just, you have way too many expenses that are depleting your income that you're not going to work enough. And most people, when they take too much methylfolate or B vitamins, get overstimulated and they feel terrible with it. And that's creating more excitability and glutamate and more challenges. So anyways, I hope that's helpful, guys. I will be speaking in 2 weeks. We will be posting the link and the replay to this. The 15% off will still be good. I'll probably be taking that off after a week or maybe a couple days so that you just take advantage of it now. And I hope you find this really, really helpful. And if you haven't had the genetic test and you've been suffering for a long time, totally suggest that you do that because it's a big game changer. And if you've done the 23andMe or Ancestry and you thought you were only doing it for the purpose of finding out about your genealogy, and a lot of people say to me, well, I did the lowest price, just the bare bones one. So is that good enough? That's all you need. In fact, I think to me, it's a bit of I won't say a scam, but it's a bit of a oversell when they tell you they'll create reports for you because they're at a higher price point, because they're not necessarily looking at the nutrition, the epigenetics, the triggers, the lanes of traffic. They're only looking at the lanes of traffic, and they're really only applying it to specific conditions. I'll actually explain what's really cool about it is when drug companies do something called pharmacokinetics, what they do is they tell you what drugs or pharmaceuticals your body processes quickly or slowly so that they can figure out what the best medications are for you. And I think that's a great thing, because if you have some alterations in your balance of your neurotransmitters and you want to support that function as a short-term thing while you get upstream to the root causes of the problem, which isn't usually the second part of the story that you're being told. You're being told, okay, take this, see you later. And it's like an open-ended, what, forever? But whole other side thing. What they do is they do research that talks about what genes are clearing these things out, what genes clear out these drugs and chemicals and toxins, what pathways they go through, and what nutrients help that gene work better, and what things inhibit that gene. And then what happened was 23andMe and Ancestry stopped putting really important gene SNPs on there because it didn't help them in understanding the processing of medications. They were more gene SNPs with how the nutrients and the epigenetic factors inhibit or inhibiting those genes. So in English, what that means is they took a lot, like, so the irony is a lot of people will tell me, well, I did it a long time ago and I only did the basic one. Perfect, because the older your report was, the more gene SNPs are on there because they hadn't started to snip away and prune out the nutrient genes that they're not really concerned about. So the older it is, and if it's just the basic, you have the genomic information to go down those rabbit holes and have someone like myself or someone else interpret that for you and really get some ahas. So anyways, I hope that's really helpful. I don't know if there's any other questions. I think that's it. And again, Kristen, thanks for helping me. I always appreciate your time on here. And I hope anyone else that watched this found that this was very, very helpful. And I look forward to helping you end your not being able to sleep nightmare, not having energy nightmare, crashing in the middle of the day nightmare, and ultimately getting back to that destination that you've punched in. If for nothing else, the takeaway that you got from today was that I need to actually know what I would do once I'm healthy, and not wait for me to be healthy to figure that out, because it's not going to happen until you do that first. And in areas of personal health, in areas of your community, in areas of your family, friends, or network, and areas of your purpose and meaning. Do it in those 4 areas and watch your health start to get better before you do anything else. So hope you guys have an awesome evening, and I will see you on the next call. Take care.